So welcome, Harry.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Oh, that's great. I've been watching you on Instagram, and well, I was going to say I watch the way you handle snakes, and I'm scared of snakes, but that's not actually true. I used to be scared of snakes, and then I faced my challenge with a python, and I'm still not going to say I'm keen to pick them up, but I have a much greater appreciation for them. So you've been doing some fantastic stuff. You're 12. You got 17 reptiles. You want to be the first youngest person to build a reptile zoo, and you do your own, like you do a lot of little talks and shows on your Instagram. So it's fantastic. So first of all, anyone listening, go and follow. And I'm going to say this again later. Back to Next to Nature with Harry on Instagram, and so you can have a look at what he's doing. So thanks for joining me, Harry. I'm really excited to learn a bit more about reptiles.
Yep.
And you're excited to tell me about them, aren't you?
Yeah. I love reptiles and teaching people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm interested to learn. So you've got 17 reptiles at the moment, and 7 of those are snakes. So like you didn't just get these last year, because it's a lot of reptiles. So when did you, or maybe you did, I don't know. When did you first start showing an interest in reptiles?
So when I first started actually showing an interest in reptiles, that was probably around 1 or 2 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, but when I first started owning snakes and properly getting started, I think that was around the 18th of October last year.
I was last year. Oh, that's fantastic. So before you had them, what did you do? You're just sort of reading about them and finding them and touching them and going to other. How were you interacting them before you actually got your own?
So before I got my own, I was going to places like Reptile Encounters and Gunbuyer
Yeah.
and interacting with them. And then I was probably for about a year just doing heaps of research on them and learning everything about them and asking other experts in the profession.
So why reptiles? What's that? Why do you really love them so much?
So I've kind of always loved animals, but they're really interesting, they're really cool, and it's something that not a heap of people have.
Yeah.
And they're just very pretty as well once you get to know them.
Pretty. Now, that's not a word most people would use for reptiles, is it? Pretty. Most people scream and jump and yell and, flick and God knows what when they see a reptile. So what do you think is pretty about them?
So colors and patterns is really, I think, beautiful with them. And it's also really cool when you start breeding them to see those different colors and mutations come out in them. And yeah, they do get some very beautiful patterns.
Wow. Have you got any that change colours?
So there are some that change colors over their lifetime, but not in a few seconds.
Yeah.
I don't have them personally, but green tree pythons, they do change color from yellows to reds to greens as they're older.
Wow.
So quite interesting.
Yeah. When you're talking about patterns, I know you don't have any tiger snakes. Well, I hope you don't have any tiger snakes. But anyway, it's a bit risky. But do they change? Like they've got so many different patterns, and I used to think all tiger snakes had the same pattern, but they're really really different with all their patterns and.
Yeah, so basically how they get their different patterns isn't through breeding, but it's through localities. So basically how they blend into their habitats. So there's a couple of certain species or localities that are really, really cool of tiger snakes. I do think that Chapel Islands are probably my favorite. They're also larger depending on where they come from.
Mm.
But they do get spots and different bands and things like that. So it is pretty interesting.
Why are the Chapel Island tiger snakes your favourite?
So they typically have a much nicer yellow and kind of wavy bands, as well as they are larger and they can typically be more friendly. So
Friendly. Most people listening aren't going to believe you. Why are we so scared of tiger snakes? Because people have this attitude that snakes are going to chase you, and but snakes are more scared of us, aren't they?
Yeah, it's actually a giant myth is chasing. So kind of to explain that background is typically they'll take the fastest route to get away from you. And
Mm,
because they are faster than us, it's typically the same route as us because we'll run down the track and get away. So they'll do the same thing. And sometimes they will be hissing and rearing up, but that's only because you're there and you are freaking it out because a lot of the time you step on their log or you accidentally step on them,
mm.
and it's where they freak out from this giant that a lot of the time will kill them.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true because we've had a tiger snake in our hay, and it retreated very fast when I grabbed the grabbed the hay. Unknowing, I didn't know there was a snake on top of it, and I grabbed the bloody bale. I don't know how the hell it didn't bite me, but it went into the hay, and then we had one in our laundry, and it got the hell out of there once the door was open. We've also had a brown snake, in the garden, and the dog and two cats had it bailed up, and then when we went out and grabbed the dogs and cats, it took off back through the paddock. So you're right, but actually it wasn't until I had closer interactions with them, that I started to realize, hey, they're actually really nice. I think they're really nice animals, and I don't know why we harm them. But what reptile did you start with? So when you said back in October last year, when you decided, well, I'm going to start breeding or owning or whatever you're doing there, which one did you start with and why?
So the first proper reptile that I started keeping was Simpson's pythons. Now, a lot of people don't actually know about them as first pets. However, they are part of the Antaresia family, which is the smallest family of pythons in the world.
Yeah,
So they're good for just starting off with a small snake to manage it,
yeah,
and they don't need to eat big food. Um, as well as the fact that their temperament is probably the best. So you can't really get a Simpson's python that does freak out unless hatchies of all snakes can freak out because they're so small.
yeah,
Uh, but that's one that typically people don't know about because they go to children's pythons,
yeah,
and they're not actually named for that reason. They are named because of the person that found them,
yeah,
which is another misunderstanding when you're purchasing your first snake. Otherwise, people can just get the coastals and jungle pythons because they are fairly pretty, but generally they do get sold after a while because they get fairly large.
yeah. Do they bite? Pythons bite?
So, yeah, they can bite, and certain species are more prone to it. Um, but most pythons are pretty good once they grow up. Uh, Normally, all hatchies will freak out. Sometimes they won't strike, but they will get defensive.
Yeah,
Uh, but there are a few species that, don't do as well with handling. And it's mainly because they are of a much smaller build that they can be easily threatened and freak out.
yeah. I love what you've said there, Harry, that you did your research, and you asked the experts and that kind of stuff. I think, I'm not for people keeping animals in cages or reptiles if they don't know what they're doing. And there's a lot of people who do that, and the animals die in their care. It's not even care, but because they haven't done their research, they just think, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have a snake? And they kill the poor bloody thing, or neglect it, which I think's awful. So you've said something really key there, and that is do your research before you think you're going to be keeping reptiles. So that's good. And then when you started building on it, like how many pythons did you have, and then when did you go to? I'll call them lizards, but you're probably going to correct me. But that sort of thing.
Um, so basically, I had lizards before that,
Oh, okay.
uh, but only a couple.
Yeah.
And then after James turned, I think it was 25, he was meant to move out, James and my brother, and he didn't. So I was allowed to get snakes from then on. I think it was 7 days later I bought my first Simpsons python. So yeah,
Wow.
it was fairly small for its age, but it was just kept in a fairly small tank and not fed probably adequate meals. Um, and then it's done very well here. It's still not great with large feeds, but yeah, it's done pretty well. And then after that, we bought a pair of Simpsons pythons.
Yeah.
Then we got two Aki monitors and three frilled necks.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just kept on going, and we got uh, another Simpsons python at an expo. We got two larger carpet pythons,
Wow.
and the only python that naturally inhabits Victoria.
Yeah.
So they're a very cool species, the Murray darlings.
Yeah.
And we've recently started collecting some more geckos.
Wow. Let me tell you, I want to ask you stuff about that in a minute. Let me tell you a story. I used to go to Hawaii all the time, or still do. And one year I came home and opened my suitcase and a gecko came out. And so the poor little thing had traveled with me all the way from Hawaii. It must have got in my suitcase when I was packing it. And I built it a big enclosure. And then I rang what do you call it? Like I can't think what you call them. The quarantine people rang them and said, I've got a gecko. And then they came and I thought they were going to take care of it. And I said, what are you going to do with it? And they said, well, probably kill it because we can't just. And then it was too late then. I couldn't keep it. So I felt really bad that I'd actually reported this poor little gecko, but I don't know whether I would have killed it or not. And I don't know whether it would have been carrying diseases or not. But Harry, you've got gloves on there. Are you planning to show me something? And because you look like you're ready to grab a snake or something.
Yeah, so I'm going to grab a snake out right now, but
Oh, good.
these are actually for snakes. They are for my frill neck because she's got very sharp claws. So, and also because they do walk through their poo, they can generally give you scars from infection.
Yeah. Oh,
But
really?
yeah, this is the first snake. This is
What
a stem python, and
Simpson?
it's almost adult size.
So, guys,
Uh,
if you're listening to this on the podcast, like just listening, you should actually also go to YouTube and go about 10 minutes in and go and listen and go and have a look at Harry with his Simpson's python. Sorry, Harry, I interrupted you, but I don't want people to miss the visual of this.
all right. So this snake here is an eastern variety or locality, and it's just a normal Simpsons python, so it hasn't got any special morphs to it like some of my others.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was the first snake that I got,
Yeah. Well,
and yeah.
wow. All right. What else do you got? A frill neck lizard. Did you say that spikes you? Did you say it was a? Oh, sorry. You haven't finished telling me about the Simpsons.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say this was actually the first snake that I got.
Wow.
So we're also coming up on our 1 year anniversary, so she's uh, definitely a focal point right now, as she was kind of what started the bigger picture in the
Yeah.
program.
Does she have a name?
Yeah, so this is Hercules, which we recently found out was a female because professional in the industry, Colin Ray, came and sexed her for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
Hercules,
Simpsons python.
yep, Simpsons Python, the number one Kickstarter for the journey. Yep.
Yep.
And is there something else you get? You might as well do it all now. What's that? The frilly neck.
So we'll probably do the frilled neck last,
Yep.
but this is another really interesting species, which is fairly good for first lizards.
Yeah.
So right here we've got a fairly small one because the bigger ones are breeding currently. But this is an Acme monitor.
Wow.
This is a pygmy species of monitor, and they're very, very fast, so I'm not going to put it down. But these are absolutely awesome lizards. They do puff up their throat sometimes. And as you can see, they've got the lovely spots
Yeah.
and nice long tongues with the forks in them, and that spiny tail, which is their nickname, the spiny tail lizard. So yeah, They're very cool lizards.
So where do people find these in the wild? And I'm not suggesting that people go out to the wild and pick up lizards and bring them home, but like, because a lot of times you go out into the bush, and you see a lizard, you think it's a snake, people try to harm them or people stomp on them, whatever they do. But like what do we do when we see a lizard? Because other than just leave it alone, but should we walk away from it, or should we stand still, or should we try to send it on its way? What's the best thing to do with a lizard if we see it?
So something that a lot of people in the reptile hobby do is something called herping, where we just go around, take photos of them, and if they're friendly, handle them a little bit. So these guys can be found in WA mainly. They can be found a little bit closer toward the east, but not really.
Yeah.
Now, the best thing to do with basically all the lizards is just not really touching them and just watching them and observing them if you want to. Otherwise, you can just walk away. Try not to run or anything because that will freak them out.
Yeah.
But there aren't really too many overly dangerous species of lizards in Australia, it's only really big ones, but they're very flighty. So a lot of things like the sand goannas, they get fairly big, but they will immediately run away and they're very, very fast.
So can they hear?
Yeah, so they've got little ears.
Yeah.
Probably won't be able to see there, but on the side of their head, they've got little ears. The snakes don't. They can hear, but not properly.
Yeah.
Snakes can really just hear vibrations and things like that. However, these guys do have ears, and yes, they can hear very, very well.
So I'm wondering if people start squealing, because people do that, they squeal and scream. Is that going to freak out a lizard if people are just doing that kind of stuff, do you think?
Yeah, so it'll freak out most lizards, and you'll often see, if you do see a bearded dragon in the wild, which you can see in Victoria, they will typically hiss and open their mouth. They are probably a wild species that does get fairly freaked out easily.
Yeah.
As well as frilled neck lizards, they can freak out. But their defense, the frilled necks, is they sit on a tree and they kind of just go around it where you can't see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just kind of go straight up it. And then the babies are extremely good at camouflaging.
Yeah.
So they'll just simply sit on the tree, and they're so small that they're very hard to see.
Yeah. Well, I'm still gonna say, if you don't know what you're doing, don't touch them.
Yeah.
Like, just because I that annoys me. People poking at nature. So if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know anything about lizards, you don't know anything about snakes, admire them, but leave them alone. And because you were saying you handle them, but leave that to the people that, like people who know what they're doing and what the species is. So what have you got now? This
is another Stimson's python,
yeah.
and it's actually got some interesting background because this is a Het T plus.
Yeah.
That means that it's got when it breeds with another one of its kind, it'll have white/creamy babies.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Het T plus is a genetic thing that you can't really see until they breed, or any het morph. But yeah, this is, I think, a 8 or 9 month old Stimson's python. So this is very small, although for less than a yearling, it's actually very large.
Yeah.
Most stimmies will be born like that long, thereabouts.
So about 6 inches. Yeah.
Yes, they're very small, and these guys will actually come from eggs. I think all pythons come from eggs. However, a fair few venomous snakes actually give live birth, including death adders, copperheads, and tiger snakes.
What about brown snakes?
I'm pretty sure brown snakes do as well.
Yeah.
And so do red belly blacks, which are probably one of the friendliest venomous snakes out there.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, they're very, very pretty as well with their lovely red bellies.
Yeah, I think that. Do you know what, Harry? I was up in the bush out the back of my house at Trafalgar when I lived there, and I went up there with the dogs and kids, and and we saw a blue belly black snake. Have you ever heard of them? Oh my God, what the most beautiful, beautiful blue under their belly. And it was raised up and ready to strike. It probably wasn't ready to strike, but we just ran away. We ended up, I said, everybody run, go the other way, go, go, go. But it was the most beautiful blue I've ever seen. It was just stunning. And they're not that. Yes, I agree with you. If you're gonna step on a snake, make it a black one, because it's actually don't step on any. But what I was going to say to you about the brown, why I asked about brown snakes, I had agapanthus at my house at Trafalgar, and I thought, oh, I'm going to dig them up, get rid of them, and I sort of started digging them out. And next thing, luckily I had boots on, and I stood on what I thought was a bunch of little baby earthworms, and when I looked down, I thought, holy hell, they're not earthworms. It was like a little bunch. There's about 5 or 6 or more of tiny baby brown snakes. And oh my God. And I went to grab a container. I don't know what I went to grab, but anyway, when I came back, they were all gone. So I don't know where they went. Anyway, what have you got there? What's this next one? Why are you using a stick? Why are you not?
So this one actually lives in a tub in a rack system because it's a hatchie,
Yeah.
and it freaks out when you slide the
Oh,
tub
what?
and
It freaks out when you what?
slide open the tub.
Yeah.
It's very loud. So that's the typical behavior for this fella.
So
But
does it bite when it freaks out, or what does it do when it freaks out?
he was just looking like he might. That's
Yeah.
why you definitely don't want them to bite so that,
Yeah.
they don't have any habits. But he's super calm now. It's basically just he was freaking out in his tub and loud noises and people were above him. But now that he's out and about, he's realized, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
Nothing bad's going on. I'm not going to get hurt. That's the only reason they do get aggressive or freak out is because they'll go, oh my gosh, this giant's going to hurt me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eventually they'll realize it's not that bad and that they're definitely not going to get hurt.
Yeah. And when they bite, have they got fangs, the pythons, or have they got teeth?
So these guys have got teeth. The only thing that you would actually probably consider as fangs, I'd say, is the American snakes.
Yeah.
So not lapids like what we've got here for venomous.
Yeah.
However, death adders, they're not actually adders, they are also lapids. Um, However, they do have fangs or teeth that can move
Oh.
back,
Yeah.
whereas a lot of Australian species have fixed fang teeth.
Oh. Well, he looks quite happy.
Yeah, so he was freaking out before, but he's super good to handle once he's out. He can
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh, Never bitten or anything like that. He can just freak out of all the loud noises over his head.
Yeah.
But this is one of the coolest animals to own
Yeah.
in probably, I would say, the world for me,
Wow.
because these are the only pythons that have ever naturally lived in Victoria.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Why is that? Is it because Victoria's too cold for most pythons, or?
yeah. So even these guys will just live in Mildura and those upper areas.
Yeah.
So, however, because of bushfires and floods and all those other things,
Mm.
we have now been sort of naturally moved to New South Wales, and they don't really inhabit Victoria too much anymore. So
Mm.
it's a bit of a shame, but hopefully once the area recovers, they should come back.
Yeah. There will be people that say, oh, good, get all the snakes out of Victoria. We don't need them and that sort of stuff. But we actually do need snakes. How do you think snakes help the ecosystem?
So these guys are much larger snakes. So a lot of people are not like this, but they do eat possums.
Do
Uh,
they?
yeah, so these guys can eat possums and things like that. It is the maximum feed that they can have, but they can eat those things like that. Now he'll get like 2.5 to 3 meters long, like my other big snakes.
Wow.
So yeah, he does start off very, very small. He's, I think, almost 6 months old or something around something rather like that.
Yep.
But he's a lovely snake, and yeah, as I was saying, he's like the holy grail of snakes in Australia, especially. Um, and I don't think I've really ever seen these overseas. So it's definitely something that you, yeah, it's an interesting snake, and uh, there's a couple of places that specialize in them, and that's something that I would love to do.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, as I
Wow.
said, he's the only one in Victoria, and his name's the Murray-Darling Carpet Python because he lives on the Murray River.
Yeah. Wow, I'm noticing that you're moving very slow with the snakes too, and I think that's something that if you're going to be a reptile handler, you need to have a lot of patience and a lot of slow moving care, not just grabbing at them and that sort of stuff. And they're not toys. I've seen kids with lizards and they, throwing them around like toys, but they're very and that's a snake that you've got, of course, not a lizard, I know that, but they actually are a very fragile animal, reptiles. That's my opinion. Is that true?
Yeah, most of them are. There's one snake that I can just grab out. She's absolutely lovely. But this guy in particular, I'm being very, very slow with because he's still a little bit on edge from all the loud noises and the screens and everything.
Yeah.
But especially you do have to be fairly patient because I've got my adult large snakes and it can take half an hour for me to get them out of the tank and into the tub because
Wow.
that's why a lot of the time you can't really have heaps of leaves and everything in there because the leaves will scare them when they're moving and then they'll grab onto all these logs and it'll take longer than it'll probably take an hour to get them out.
Yeah.
So like my largest snake's 2 kilos and
Wow.
basically all so she's very strong and I believe they have 385 muscles in their body or something like that. So they have heaps of muscles.
Yeah, you're just talking about. I just want to pull you up then for the listeners is that because I'm really big on. I don't want anyone to have reptiles unless they know what they're doing. Harry's got them in tubs there, and he keeps mentioning tubs. You keep mentioning tubs. Get this one out of a tub, out of the tub. If anyone listening, please, reptiles are not kept in tubs. Tubs are only for short term, very, very short term transport or for safety. They live in tanks, and if you haven't got the proper tanks, don't bloody have them. Do not keep reptiles in tubs. There, Harry, I just wanted to say that because I don't want people getting go and buying a $3 tub from the crazy cheap shop and keeping a snake in it because that's not how you keep reptiles. So, well, all right. Well, let's see. I better. For the people that haven't got visual, we better move ourselves. What's the last one that you got your gloves on for?
So
Phil,
the last thing I do want to mention is on the enclosures. That's a very good thing, as well as with snakes, especially larger snakes, because they can freak out fairly easily, especially from predatory things like that.
yeah,
We don't have like a fish tank for one, even if it's like a 9 foot fish tank, because when you're coming in over the top, that's exactly what a large bird of prey would do.
yeah,
And it can, especially with snakes that are not as friendly naturally or just that snake individual,
mm,
they can quite easily freak out. So
yeah,
it's definitely great to have one that opens from the top. And as I was saying before, the snakes are necessary in the environment for, one, eradicating large groups of possums, but not only that, but the fact that we'd have a lot of extra birds and things like that if
yeah.
we didn't have the larger snakes, and of course mice and rats and things like that that can quite easily grow to be a problem in places that are rural,
Yeah,
and as we know.
yeah. And I'm still going to say it anyway, Harry. Do your bloody research before you get a snake. Do not get reptiles until you've done your research, for God's sake, because it's cruel if you don't know how to take care of them. All right, what's that thing? Oh, what is that?
This is the real neck.
Yeah.
She's a little bit on nerve right now. She hasn't been taken out of the enclosure for a little while. But she's absolutely lovely. When she freaks out, she'll go straight to me and climb up my head.
Is she the one you've got the gloves on for?
Yes.
So you're protecting your hands, but you don't care about your head?
Yeah, so I do normally wear a jumper when I've got her because she
Yeah.
scratches up my neck as well. But actually, another interesting thing about her is she had 3 eggs, which is odd because they normally have 24, but she was too young to actually breed. So she had to have surgery, and her 3 eggs were removed. Unfortunately, they didn't hatch, which is pretty normal for transporting them in the car and
Yeah.
them being surgically removed.
Yeah.
But she's great now. She's getting bigger and fatter and all that. And yeah, hopefully she'll be able to breed next season. But
So,
she's
yeah, go on.
but she's doing really well, and she's got that beautiful frill, which I'll try to show you. Oh, I probably can't. My gloves on. Oh, there. Yeah. So that's
Wow.
not, but that's her frill there. And they can get holes in them sometimes
Wow.
because they calm down, calm down.
Because it's so thin and
Yeah, it's very thin and fragile, but
yeah.
as juveniles and even as adults, they can run into other frill necks or other reptiles and actually be bitten on the frill fighting over things because when they frill up to make themselves look bigger.
Yeah.
And they can do that when they're fighting over food or a female, and then they might get bitten on the frill, and that's where the holes occur, and then they'll generally get bigger as time goes on because they'll slowly tear.
Mm. So are the spikes while you're wearing gloves? You said because if they scratch you, you get the cuts can get infected. Like is it are the spikes on their frills or the spikes on their claws?
They've got little spikes on the frills, but they're not sharp at all. They're paper thin scales,
Yeah,
but they have got very sharp claws for climbing those trees very quickly.
yeah.
Uh, because they do crawl through their poo, I always see it. They poop and then they run straight through it.
Oh yeah,
They typically give you a good infection.
yeah. So and not only that, if you were to see a frill neck lizard in the wild and go to pick it up, you're likely to get scratched. You're very likely to get scratched.
This is a lot of people that say that they're horrified of snakes and they don't want to be bitten by a snake, even a python, even if it's a baby. And I always say I'd honestly prefer to be bitten by a snake. And if it was a larger monitor, like lace monitors, they're beautiful animals and I love them, but they do have big claws and big teeth.
Yeah.
Like they can get about that long. So
Wow.
yeah, so if you were to get clawed or scratched up or bitten by one of them, you know, it's probably like scars and things like that, as well as their biggest weapon for defense is actually their tail. So it's
The
basically,
tail.
yeah, so they'll sit on the tree like this
Yeah.
and come up, and if you try to interact with them, they'll typically like whip it around and freak out if they don't run up the tree. And that's when, they've got a very hard tail similar to a whip, so it will also be pretty sore after that, especially big adult.
I've seen the big goannas whoop up a tree. I don't think I'd like to be whacked in the face by something like that. Wow. All right. Well, thank you for showing us all those. That's yeah, amazing. Well, I'm not picking up a frilly neck. I don't like to pick up anything. I pick up the little drop tails, but only to save them from the cats, and then I go and hide them somewhere else. But I don't be. We've had a lot of blue tongues around here too, and I don't pick those up either. So, which is good. Is it expensive, Harry, to keep these reptiles?
Yeah, so I've had a chat with a lot of people that aren't typically in the industry, and they do quite often say that that's expensive because the reptiles like frilled next to $700 each
Oh, wow.
for a pretty good deal because he wanted to get rid of them with the ackies.
Yeah,
But they can be very expensive depending on what you're getting. Uh, geckos are typically a little bit cheaper,
yeah,
depending on morphs and things like that. And venomous snakes are obviously very cheap, but not at all recommended. The
yeah,
most expensive of them is actually the license.
yeah. So, what about keeping them once you've bought them? Like the upkeep, is that expensive as well?
Yeah, so buying enclosures is also very expensive. depending on your lighting, that's very expensive. And bearded dragons are honestly one that is massive cost because they need UVB lighting, which is about $100 a bulb,
Wow.
and vet bills, obviously. But then, as well as with snakes, unless you're breeding your own food, so rats, rabbits, and mice, or quail, or anything like that, it's very expensive, especially the larger your snake gets. And if you're not buying to a private breeder, like we've got a neighbour that breeds them, and that's fine. But if you're buying adult rats through pet stock, they're probably like 20 plus bucks.
Wow.
If you're through a reptile store, they're probably 18. And if you're buying through a private breeder, I get them for about $11. So yeah, that's fairly cheap. But then of course, like rabbits is another cheap way to do it because you can breed them really easily without the smell of breeding rats as well.
Mm. But that still costs a lot of money. Have you got a full-time job, Harry?
The typical way to actually do rabbits and things like that fairly cheap is built like DIY. So I have a friend that has heaps of materials and things like that, just waste. So mesh and wood and all that kind of thing. So you can build the rabbit hutches yourself, and yeah, you don't have to. The other thing is with reptiles, I see people go out and they buy a normal light for $20, whereas you could go online at a reptile store, buy for 10, or go to Bowen's. It's the exact same light, just doesn't have reptile written on it,
Yeah.
and it's $8 less. So things like that are really good as well. You never want to be cheaping out on your reptiles, but at the same time, you don't need to go get all these special things when you can just use uh, normal lights as long as it is fit for the job.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's you don't just want to go and grab any old globe just because it says have lighting, so you just go grab anything, because you could actually be putting a globe in that's not going to keep them warm, but it also could be a globe that overcooks them, and you don't realize that you're cooking them. So again, I'm going to say it again. Don't do it without your research, for God's sake. Ask the experts. So how what do you, because you go out and you raise awareness, when you're trying to advocate for reptiles and everything, what are you hoping that you'll achieve from that? So what are you hoping that people will come away with and thinking differently about reptiles?
So a lot of the things that I want to do is shows, and when I do that, I really hope that uh, if people are brave enough to go to them, they do realize, hey, they're not scary.
Mm,
Maybe hey, they'll get one, or they can just be happy with them being around them, and not be horrified. Some people, they are absolutely horrified, and that's absolutely fine. They can be scared, but it would be really nice if I were able to do some shows and things like that, and then people realize, hey, they're not that bad, or even just doing those shows to get people that are thinking about buying reptiles uh, more interested in buying a reptile. Because a lot
and
of the time, when you go to those shows and you go, oh, wow, it's a really impressive snake, and then you go to the stores, find out facts about it, you go to other places and find out facts about them, and then you go research them, which another thing is there's so much information out there. You do really need to choose one source, which is typically I'd recommend going to a breeder in your local area. And
yeah,
it's no use going to a breeder in America, finding out all their information, because they've got different weather, they've got different lights and brands and everything like that. So, like, for example, I see all this great stuff at the Dollar Tree where you can buy water dishes and things like that for cheaper, but it's just not here. So, the things like bowls for water dishes or defrosting mice or whatever it may be is very different. So you will go for the substitute, but substitute may not be at all the correct thing. So
yeah.
the good thing to do when you're wanting to get one is just go with someone like even in Queensland, if I live in Victoria, that's probably a bad source as well because they could keep them outside where it's perfectly warm in cans. But then
Mm,
when you come down, you can't keep them outside because it's like 6 degrees less.
yeah.
So yeah, it's very tricky, and you kind of just have to pick someone close to you and probably talk to the reptile stores and you know go there regularly and become good friends with them and learn everything from them and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're saying also about when you do those shows, if people are, you said hopefully people will want to keep them. And I think that the good thing about you doing the shows is that you're helping people to keep them responsibly. You know, you're saying to them, you can't just keep them. If you're gonna keep reptiles, you have to do it properly and do it well because they deserve, you know, to be treated properly. Harry, this has been great. I've got one last big question. You want to be the youngest person to build a reptile zoo in Australia. How are you tracking for that? Like, are you on track?
Yeah, we're pretty well on track.
Yeah,
It's it's a fairly seasonal job until you get into a good flow of it and get all the species so that you can time everything correctly.
yeah,
Um, as well as in the first year or two, it is very tricky to get your snakes onto your breeding schedule.
yeah,
But once you start breeding and things like that and becoming an influencer as well and known out in the reptile industry, um, it gets pretty easy. As well as there's someone in the reptile industry. He's awesome. He's in South Africa, Dingo Dinkelman, and he, I believe, is starting up a reptile zoo. He's awesome and he does some really cool stuff.
yeah,
And he's also very good at myth busting and really showing you that they're not horrifying.
yeah,
Um, even though he does handle some snakes that freak out pretty well. Um, he also hangs out with animals that you would typically go, they'll kill you, and they don't even really try to bite him or anything like that. As well as there's another place that's absolutely awesome. I would love to go there one day. It's Nerd, so it's New England,
yeah.
and they do the most incredible stuff I've ever seen with caiman crocodiles. That those crocodiles will typically they're the least friendly reptiles, I'd say. And
Yeah.
he's got them so that you can pat their head and they won't even care at all. He's got cobras that you can pat and hold, and they're absolutely fine. So he does some really good stuff with bonding and threads and no boundaries where you can touch their face and their body and not just their tail or something, and they don't freak out. So it's very
Wow. Wow. That would take a lot of patience. Are you wanting this zoo for people to be able to come and visit? Like, do you want it to be a physical space where people can come in and you know watch reptile shows, or you want to do it mostly online?
so I would love to do physical,
Yeah.
and I'd love to have all different animals that you don't typically see and have it so that you can handle them and get close to them, as well as a stage so that I can do like speaking gigs with them there.
Yeah.
But I would also love to have cameras in all the enclosures, which I'd love to be nice and big, um, so that people can watch live streams of some of our coolest animals there.
Oh, that sounds great. Where do you want to do this in
So
Victoria? Like,
yeah, I've looked at a couple different places, but they'll probably be gone by the time that I'm ready for it.
yeah.
So I'd just like to probably buy somewhere in a bushy kind of area so I can really well tell an example of this is where you would actually see these snakes. So it's a really good way to gauge on this is the place you'd see them, this is a little bit about these animals and things like that. And then, it's not in somewhere that's super competitive and things like that, and where they can say this is all the stuff about snakes, but they're in the city. So you can't really tell too much about it because people go to the city and they can look at pictures of the environment if you show them, but it doesn't really gauge properly on what it actually looks like. But it would be awesome also to have it in a nice big factory as well.
Mm.
So
So what age? So how far away do you think it is before you do it?
So like probably around 8 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit less. I'm hoping a little bit less. But hopefully next year after breeding season, I should be getting a shipping container and putting that out with reptiles.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then it'll turn into a wing of the house eventually.
Yeah.
When we get our next house. And then that'll turn to a breeding facility, and then the reptile zoo will be built.
Wow, you've got it all planned out. I was going to ask you, do you have it all stepped out? But it sounds like you do. That's awesome. And do you go into schools now currently and do the shows?
No, but I am hoping to do that next year.
Yeah,
And
fantastic.
I've also talked to a few schools a school that would like to do that.
Yep.
And yeah, it'd be really cool also to do that at some of the things like the Pakenham show and different shows like that.
Yeah.
As well as myth busting, because a lot of people, as you said before, chasing and live born, a lot of people say, oh, they've always got scales, they always lay eggs. And some of them don't have scales, some of them don't lay eggs. So, as well as people say they're always going to bite you and give you like a full dose of venom, sometimes they'll bite you and not give you any venom. Like, it's not great to try.
Yeah.
Definitely don't try it. But, I've known a lot of people that will get bitten by a venomous snake but not have anything in them because snakes don't want to waste their venom. They're very small, limited amount of venom on someone that they know they can't eat.
Yeah.
So they say food, especially when people go, baby's venom is more toxic. It's not actually more toxic. They just can't control how much they let out. So adults will give you a little bit of their venom if they're biting you, whereas babies will kind of just give you everything because they don't know how to section out venom and go, that's a little bit, keep the rest.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. As well as I hear a lot of people, they do say things like when they have slit pupils, they're venomous. When they have circular pupils, they're not. So all venomous snakes in Australia actually have circular pupils because they're, so adders, vipers have slit pupils, but elapids don't. So king cobras, tiger snakes, all those kind of things, and even inland taipans, the most deadly snake in the world or most venomous snake in the world, has circular pupils. So that's not really true at all. And it's definitely another thing that a lot of people believe, and I'd really like to share that that's not true because people will see, like, I think one of my Simpsons pythons, I think all of them actually typically have slit pupils. I mean, sometimes they can dilate them a little bit so they're round, but typically they're slit, especially when they're in food mode. And that's a lot of the time what people will say, oh my gosh, they're super aggressive, but either they're just a hatchie or you're going to feed them. Like I have a snake that as soon as she smells a rat, she'll go straight into kind of getting to the point where she might strike you, but only because she's like, you've got a rat somewhere. Yeah. So I think it's really important to say, like, Stimson's python is like smallest python in the world, even have slit pupils. So it's a really, this is the least dangerous snake you could probably ever find, or the least aggressive and venomous remotely, and this is the most venomous and it's got circular pupils. So it's a really comparison to show it's actually the exact opposite in most cases.
Well, can I just say, Harry, that's wonderful information, but I don't think I want to get close enough to a snake to actually see if it's got round pupils or slit pupils. I think I would just say, just respect it and let it go. It just doesn't matter. Just stay away from it. I actually think that the biggest thing that it sounds to me like you're trying to teach is just to have respect for, reptiles and don't make assumptions. Don't treat them badly. Don't put them in their awful, vicious things and try to harm them. Just like, just respect them and don't manhandle them. That sort of stuff. And
yeah, so we actually have recently started saying, um, well, I go to Gunwire a lot. There's tiger snakes there that I absolutely love. The male's beautiful. He's got really nice colours and patterns. And everyone, all the parents walk past and say, don't go near that. That's dangerous. That's scary. That will kill you. And a lot of the time I think that like might bite you, probably won't kill you because there's anti-venom, but it's not like it's going to kill you.
Mm.
So it's another big thing, but it's don't be careful, be aware. So you just want to know and things like that, as well as a lot of what you said on respect and things like that. Because see people that go, oh, it's a dumb, stupid croc, and they tap it and they annoy it, and then it will try and bite them, and everyone goes, oh, it's vicious. And it's like, yeah, but they were like,
Minding
obviously
their
they
own
don't,
business.
obviously they can't hear like when you call him names, but they can pick up on, they're being nasty, they're annoying me, and you know, a lot of people that I see that do videos on reptiles, which is some people that, as you said, you don't like it when people don't know about the information before they purchase a reptile. I don't like it when you get those people that run shows, but before they do shows, they put it in the tub when they're taking it there and they tap it and they annoy it so that when they take it out, it's super aggressive and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, so that it's a better show. But for me, the better show is going, hey, this snake is not aggressive. Like, obviously, don't go up to it in the wild, even if you own your own snakes. You don't know what it's like.
Yep.
But the better show is telling people what it is, because those people, they might love reptiles, but I feel like if you do that, you're kind of going to other people, don't get reptiles, don't handle reptiles. Whereas if you're showing them, hey, this is nice, they're going, well, the venomous snake is nice, then a python is like almost sure to be friendly.
Mm.
So it's going to, if you love reptiles, you'll be trying to get other people to get reptiles and own them correctly and not tap them and all this other kind of stuff. So as well as I see people tapping the glass, and that really, really frustrates me because people say, "Oh, it'll get them to come over to you." The only reason they come over to you is because they're very frustrated,
Mm.
or they're going, "Hey, what's that?" And then typically they'll get angry, or they'll just go, "Oh, never mind," and just like scoot away or
Yeah.
run away. So
Yeah.
they don't really. It doesn't do anything. So those that tap on the glass, it doesn't really uh, change anything. They might look over to you for a second, but then they're going to go away. And
Mm.
typically, because it's so annoying and it might frighten them, they're going to go in their hide. They're going to go behind a rock where you can't see them and they feel safe. So, yeah, that's typically what they'll do, especially in the wild when people get bitten, like by, for example, by death adders. The only reason people get bitten by them typically is either doing something silly with them or they step over a log when they're bushwalking and it freaks out because they're very, very fast. Um, it'll come out, even if it's not trying to bite them, even if it's just trying to come out, scare them, it might accidentally get them or it might deliberately get them, but it's generally, they're never actually gunning for you. They're not going
Mm.
to go, hey, I want to get that person. They're going to go away, go away. And then if you leave, they'll just go back underneath their log. If not, they will either bite you or run away. And the worst case is run away. And I say worst case because that means that the animal will no longer have its safe place and will most likely be either picked up by a predator or will just die because it doesn't know where it is. And a lot of reptiles are extremely predatory.
Mm.
So if you come into their area, they will fight you out of it.
Yep. Yep.
Similar to cheaters. So it's not really great when that happens at all.
Well, it comes down to respect again, and it also comes down to this, human beings trying to dominate everything in the world. And if we would just be a little bit kinder and allow everything to coexist with us and respect that we've all got a place in the world, we wouldn't have half the problems that we have. So we're both sharing the same messages, but in different ways. But it's still the same thing. Don't harass others, like don't think that don't demand things of others, don't anyway, all that stuff. Harry, where can people find you to follow you on Insta and YouTube? I think you've got, is that?
Yeah, so recently we did also start a Facebook page. But it's just with Harry over Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm there.
I just spoke over you when you said it, so the next got cut out. So Harry just said it's Next to Nature with Harry on Insta, YouTube, and Facebook. Sorry, Harry, because when I talk, your voice cuts out, and I cut that first bit off. So Next to Nature with Harry. So go and follow him, because I think he does some really, really great talks on there and shows you a lot of great reptiles and talks a lot about it. So Harry, thank you so much for joining me. I've absolutely loved this. You've made me think twice about picking up a frill like this. Because I didn't realize they're closed, but no, you've given some. I was joking. You have given such amazing information in here, and stuff that we wouldn't even think about. Whereas we've just got this sort of attitude towards reptiles. Not we, but like a lot of people have just kind of got reptiles. But they do have a place on the planet. We do need them in the ecosystem, and they're not there for our pleasure or for our destruction. They're there to coexist with us, and I think that what you're doing is sending a really valuable message to people to take to have more respect, to be more aware, to be more compassionate to other species. And I really love what you're doing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was awesome being here.
Beautiful. All right. Well, hopefully I'll meet you in person when you're doing a reptile show.
Yep.
All right. Thanks heaps, Harry. See ya.
Yeah.
Ta-da.